All right, we will now link up with Eshomo Moimodu and TVC Adeoye in our Abuja studio for the conversation around the suspension of Governor Simonalayi Fubara and declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State. Good morning, TVC. Good morning, Eshomo. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Good morning,
Veronica. Good morning.
And Ibrahim.
Morning. All right, you can take away the conversation now.
All right, thank you so much. TVC, I'm just wondering, why is it that we have so much tension in the society?
Well, I can't
Rivers
say.
State, National Assembly, every place is intense.
That seems to be the matter that has dominated, the public discussion for weeks. And we just hope that, peace is restored and we just move back to, governance and, moving the country forward rather than settling scores.
We're entering the election year 2027,
well,
so probably
maybe
we'll
that
expect
explains a lot.
more such tension.
Of course, of course.
Okay, let's give you what we have. Thanks for joining us on this segment of the program from Abuja. Rising from a meeting with the nation's security chiefs, leaders and principal officials of the National Assembly on March 18, President Bola Tinubu, citing several other reasons, declared a state of emergency in Rivers State, suspending Governor Sim Fubara, his deputy Ngozi Odu, and all lawmakers of the Rivers State House of Assembly for an initial period of 6 months. Also, President Tinubu appointed the former Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Ibo Kete Ibas, as sole administrator of the states.
Now some Nigerians are blaming the president for suspending elected state officials, which they describe as unconstitutional. Others, however, see the presidential action as a timely and pragmatic intervention, which truncated attempts by the lawmakers to impeach Governor Fubara. An outcome they say could have plunged Rivers State into a crisis of unimaginable proportion and also threatened the nation's economic base. While the arguments for and against the suspension persist, the new administrator of the state has since settled down to work. And following the endorsement of the President Tinubu's proclamation by both houses of the National Assembly, the ex-naval chief disclosed to the entire state that the withheld federal allocation have been released. He has also appointed his own secretary to the state government. And for more on the pressure mounting from the suspension of Governor Fubara and the lawmakers, let's speak with the president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Afam, Osigwe, the senior advocate of Nigeria. He joins us live in our studio here in Abuja. It's good to have you on the program this morning, senior advocate.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. Well, let's jump straight into the matter. You have continued to insist that the suspension of the Rivers State Governor Simonalayi Fubara is unconstitutional, but the National Assembly approved the action taken by the president. Should the conversation now shift to building peace and stability, or the suspension must be reversed?
Well, my take is that the whole proclamation in the first place was unconstitutional, because the Constitution stipulated conditions under which a state of emergency could be proclaimed by the president, and we insist that those conditions were not in existence. And when we talk about the president saving the governor from impeachment and the state from plunging into a crisis of an unimaginable scale, it gets down to the point that the proclamation, or it confirms our position that the proclamation was done for a reason other than that stipulated in the Constitution. I may not have enough intelligence to know what may or would have happened if an impeachment process, which is a constitutionally recognized mode of removing a governor, had taken place. But the point I make that if the combatants, and I will use this word advisedly at this time, had said that the president had been firmer in insisting on them agreeing on position to move the state forward, we may not be talking about impeachment, much less about a proclamation of state of emergency to stave off an impeachment so as to stabilize security in the state. And our reasoning also extends to the fact that, assuming a state of emergency was properly proclaimed in Rivers State, the president lacks the power to remove an elected official like himself, because the declaration of state of emergency under Section 305 does not extend to dismantling of democratic institutions in the state. It does not extend to the president taking away the mandate the people had given to the governor, his deputy, and the House of Assembly to carry out their constitutional functions. And if these two actions, both the proclamation and the suspension, in our view, are unconstitutional, the National Assembly has nothing to ratify, because there have to be constitutional processes which are proper for there to be a valid ratification of the proclamation by the president. And I don't want to go into talking about even that so-called ratification or purported ratification by both chambers of the National Assembly, because they were also in violation of the Constitution. So it's all a tissue of constitutional acts. Constitution says to third majority, and you do a voice vote. How do you ascertain that that constitutional stipulated minimum vote to ratify the action was met? And if you refer me to the attendance, I tell you that the attendance is not a good proof that the constitutional requirement was met. Because if it says two-thirds, then you must take individual votes and record it to know those who voted for, those who voted against, and those who abstained. Because the majority shouted, "Ayes have it," does not mean that the minorities whose voices may have been drowned out in the process were not there and were dissenting, even though they formed part of those who signed in the attendance register for the day.
Okay, SN, I think we'll come properly back to this issue of the action of the National Assembly, the voice vote and all that. But let's take a look at this. The president has access to certain security reports that you and I don't have. And would you have advised that the president sit back, the president of Nigeria sit back and allow the state to boil before taking action? Now, if we go back to 2013, for instance, when President Jonathan declared state of emergency, the governors wrote they were not the principal actors contributing to the crisis in the state. They wanted security, so he did not remove them. In this instance, the two institutions, the legislature, the executive, were the ones responsible for the crisis in the state. So how else will the president have
I still insist that the fact that there's a face-off between the legislature and the executive does not mean that that position can only be met by a state of emergency. Under Gbenga Daniel, there was such a situation in Ogun State. Under Obaseki, there was such a situation in his first term in Edo State. At some point, I also think
Ogun State?
Yes. Under Gbenga Daniel, there was no state of emergency. Yeah. Whatever happened, there's even a crisis much worse than the face-off between the executive and legislature going on in Osun State, which is being met by security measures being put in place to restore peace in those areas. There's also the issue of Benue. The clash is going on there, the deaths being recorded. Zamfara, Borno State. The point is that you cannot always use the security situation to justify, or no doubt the president has security briefings not known to the public. But for me to objectively assess whether the facts exist to justify a state of emergency, my first port of call would be publicly available information and then also reason given by the president in his broadcast. And whichever point you look at, respectfully, they do not justify the action. And I insist it's like cutting off your head or taking a slight hammer to your head because you have a headache. Because there were alternatives. The president could have brought the two persons to the table, the governor, and the other person led by a minister in his government. So the point is, not every security situation, there will always be security reports, mind you. And not all will justify state of emergency. But does Rivers State require certain actions to restore peace? Yes. Must people swallow their ego to achieve this? Yes. What kind of solution must be found? It would not be an action that does violence to the Constitution, but one that uses politics. Because the issues are political. They are not security. It's disagreement between two major persons who have found it difficult to come to attempt to resolve the issue. It's not as if they have taken up arms. It's not a security situation. And I keep saying, if the major players will swallow their ego and sit down and resolve whatever difference, because these differences are even personal to my mind, because they are not institutional. They have nothing to do with governance. They have nothing to do with law or the security and welfare of the Rivers people, who unfortunately are the victims of this situation we have on.
Well, the president made efforts to settle the issue that caused the conflict in the first place. We saw him meet with the governor of Rivers State and also the minister of the FCT, and resolutions were made which both parties agreed to. But his efforts were disregarded. Don't you think that he was left?
I don't know who disregarded that. If resolutions were made, at the time those resolutions became public, I thought they were lopsided. Much lopsided.
But Governor Fubara agreed to it.
I'm not saying it. I thought they were lopsided. It doesn't matter whether they agreed. It's not my business. But if I have also called a meeting and resolutions were agreed, there should be follow-up meetings on implementation. What happened? Also, that resolution said parties were to withdraw the action. One of the parties went ahead and obtained a judgment despite that agreement. If I was the person who superintended that peace meeting, I would have called for action. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Would have come back to continue to do implementation or set in place an independent body to ensure. But I don't want to do a revisit this or have a revisionist approach to it. What is the situation in Rivers State today? The combatants are yet to ship their swords. There is need to bring them and make them find a solution, agree to a solution that works. We shouldn't be talking about what could have been done or what was not done or who refused to. Now is the time to insist that people must commit to peace and find a solution that evenly finds a balance, solutions that work for every person in a win-win situation, not in one making person feel very triumphant while another person feels his face has been rubbed in the mud, but allows both parties to leave the room not happy, not unhappy, but allows them to with dignity implement these things, bearing in mind that at the end of the day, it is about Rivers State and its people, not about them. That the state needs to be stable for them to exert whatever political power or influence they have.
All right, we'll come back to that, but we'll take this quick commercial break now. The conversation continues right after this break. Stay with us.
Informed. Watch analysis of major happenings in the political space and how it affects.
Glad to have you back. It's still TVC Breakfast and we're live in our Abuja studio. We're still speaking with the son, Afam Osigwe, who is the president of the Nigerian Bar Association.
Yeah, I was just about asking that during the time of President Jonathan, there was this doctrine of necessity that the National Assembly invoked so that we'll avoid a constitutional crisis. Would it have been possible that we go through the routes of something like a doctrine of necessity that will help the president also to manage the situation while also the crisis in Rivers State is neat?
So the doctrine of necessity is resorted to when there is no provision in the Constitution that will regulate what people may or may not do. If you recall the situation that time, the then President Umar Yar'Adua, God bless his soul, was ill, was incommunicado, nobody knew his whereabouts, and there was then the suggestion that he could rule or govern from anywhere. And the nation came to the conclusion that the president had become incapacitated in body and maybe in mind, that he could no longer continue to rule. And there was no provision to compel him. And the National Assembly had to resort to that doctrine to enable his then Vice President, His Excellency Jonathan Goodluck, to take over from him. So the facts are not the same. In the present circumstance, Section 305 has stated when you can declare a state of emergency. Section 188 has stipulated in what circumstance a governor may be removed from office, and a state of emergency is not one of them. Section 11 of the Constitution stipulated what would happen when that declaration is made. The National Assembly can make law for the state, and likewise the House of Assembly can also make laws, meaning the lawmaking powers can be exercised side by side. And we must be careful, sir, when we resort to such doctrine to justify every action. It means the president can even order that a people's house be demolished, a whole village be sacked under the so-called doctrine of necessity. We cannot compare apples with oranges to justify every action. And that is why the Rivers State is crying for attention. In your intro, you talked about the funds being released. The judgment of the Supreme Court said that the money be withheld until a budget be presented. No budget has been presented. that money ought not to have been released because the judicial pronouncement on how and when that money will be released has not been met. I would have expected that a budget would have been sent to the National Assembly. In Obasanjo's time when state of emergency was declared, it happened. The National Assembly should appropriate for Rivers State, otherwise you have an administrator whose position is not known to law and who will be spending money without any regulatory any statutory backing and nothing, no checks and balances on what he can do. We run a greater risk. That money ought not to have been released until the judicial pronouncement in the Rivers case was met. No budget is presented. Well, I wonder how CBN released that money without being shown evidence that the condition precedent for its release had been met.
Well, the former president, Buhari, once said that if there's a threat to national security, the rule of law takes the back seat. Could this have been the issue?
That's a military mindset. It's a military mindset. It's a military mindset. The rule of law takes the back seat. It's the rule of law that sustains him as president. What if also that under this and people also, the rule of law taking a mindset, people also...
So are you saying that the national security
there must be rule of law. National security
when
matters.
It's threatened.
National security matters to the extent that it may impact on people's enjoyment of their freedom. But it does not mean that people will run riot and do whatever they choose. The law will even still be there to somewhat regulate what they do. But extra measures will be taken. But it doesn't mean you can behave anyhow, as we say in Nigeria. It doesn't mean you can act as you like.
So are you
and
saying
act as if the law no longer
acted anyhow?
Well, I would say the president's action respectfully are unconstitutional.
Okay.
But the quote you are giving me would appear to suggest that you can do just about anything under the sky. And as long as, and who defines national security? I mean, some definition may be self-serving.
But we saw pipelines being blown up. That, you remember, is the economic line or lifeline of Nigeria. Should you have advised the president to sit back and watch all those go up in flames and set the country back?
Like I say this to you, are you aware that when bandits stop villagers from going to their farms to farm, or impose a tax on them, or drive them out of their villages, our national security is threatened? Are you suggesting whenever anything that by our definition forms part of the national economy is threatened, we use a state of emergency? I'm sure you're not doing that. Are you suggesting that if a pipeline goes up in flames in Bayelsa, we should take a state of emergency to it? Are you suggesting that if also happens in Edo, Delta, Ondo, or any of the oil-bearing states, that would be a justification to declare a state of emergency? I'm sure that would not be your proposition. And I'm also sure you're not suggesting that if something happens within 24 hours, we rush to declare a state of emergency. Did we have time to investigate what happened? What if those pipelines malfunction? What if they could have happened at any other time? The point I'm making is that many things could threaten our national security or economy without a declaration of state of emergency being the solution to the same. That's the point we must get. Otherwise, every politician can come someday and say, your action is a threat to national security and our economy. I hereby declare a state of emergency. There's a reason why the Constitution stipulated what would qualify for a state of emergency to be declared. It's an objective test, not a subjective test. Not a state of, is there secrets known to us? We can't tell you, because if you know it, your head will blow.
Essence, let me come back to you. You're the president of the Nigerian Bar Association. While this crisis persisted in Rivers State between the governor and the House of Assembly, before we go to this point of state of emergency, what did the NBA do to help mediate and to help ensure that either of those parties are not breaching the Constitution?
These persons, the combatants in Rivers State, I choose to call them again, that belong to a political party. You would expect that their political party will resolve.
And when that did happen?
No. We are not in politics. We promote the rule of law. It is not our business to get involved. But if they invite the NBA to be part of a mediation process, we'll gladly do so. And we insist, though, that this matter can be resolved around the table where people give and take. Who forms part of that process will remain to be seen. NBA may not be the one driving that process, but if we're invited, we would play a role in that. We're interested in seeing that peace and stability is restored to Rivers State, because Section 14.2 of the Constitution says that the welfare and security of the people shall be the primary aim of government. The people of Rivers State are not getting that. They are holding the short end of the stick. And how we achieve that, I do not know. But NBA may be able to play the role, but cannot be blamed for not playing that role, because these are political actors playing politics. and we are not politicians. We are not in that sphere with them.
But now you're speaking because now you're speaking. What I'm saying is, while a budget was presented to 3 members of the House of Assembly, why didn't the NBA come out to make statements?
Now, and you're being presumptuous in thinking that we should have come to conclusion and say this does not form the House. You see, the argument is in our hand, and I don't want to go into that because Supreme Court have made a pronouncement. I do not entirely agree with the Supreme Court, but I don't want to go into that argument, right? Okay. But at the point these budgets you refer to were presented, there were lawsuits. Say because you have crossed over to the other party, you have lost your suit. And by earlier decisions of the court, we do not need to. And the argument would have been, since it is the Speaker and his group that cross-carpeted, let me use that word, who will be the presiding officer to do that? It has to be those who are remaining, who have not changed political party. But the Supreme Court has pronounced on it, and I don't want to go into it. Point being made is, if a matter is in court, we'll be remiss to go and say, and start commenting on it. That would be irresponsible of us.
Well, the Nigerian Bar Association recently rejected calls for the security agencies to investigate the Rivers State Chief Judge, citing concerns that it could further exacerbate the already volatile situation. Some people have said this suggests the judiciary is trying to shield one of its own who probably played a significant role in the political stalemate.
I keep saying that we are misusing the state security services.
Okay.
If there's an allegation of forgery by the Chief Judge of Rivers State, the proper body to investigate it, to my mind, would appear to be the Nigerian Police Force, not the Directorate of State Services. And I think that's the point being made. And I think there's a finding, a petition could be presented to the NJC, which has a role to play in this regard. And coming in the heat of politics, as it were, the branch chairman in Rivers State made that pronouncement. And being a matter within their domestic jurisdiction, they could make that statement, because in NBA, if a matter affects the branches can speak. If it affects the nation, the national leadership of the NBA can speak on it. But the point is that we must draw a line on what matters we invite the state security services to get involved in.
And when should that be determined? Where to draw?
We look at the law setting up the state security services. What are they supposed to do? Is it to investigate allegations of forgery? And it is not.
Well, you have said the crisis in Rivers State is rooted in ego and not the judiciary. But some people say lawyers, including the judiciary, should be blamed for the escalation of the conflict. Recall that there were several court judgments and injunctions that made an already bad situation worse.
I still insist that, as the judgments were, they are not the real cause, because I can go to court that iPad before you is mine, and the court makes a pronouncement that is mine. But I say, in the interest of peace, because you're using it to do a great job, I leave it for you. And how people go about insisting on their rights will have a bearing on whether you have peace. The judgment is just what it is. The law allows parties to compromise the judgment. It is our attitude, our mindset, triumphalism. That brings me back to ego. You can't do anything. Let's see who blinks first. Let's see who wins this. I'm going to show you.
So, SCN, the president has made a proclamation. National Assembly endorsed it, and as administrator is there. How do we move forward in the search for peace in Rivers State? I
recall that the Senate president talked about eminent Nigerians coming in to resolve the Rivers State crisis. I think if that group can be set up today, the earlier the better, it would help. The solution to the Rivers crisis can be found in a political solution, not in a state of emergency, not in court judgments, not in people insisting on their rights, but in people sacrificing, giving up a bit of their ego for the good and welfare and security of Rivers people and the state. Those eminent Nigerians can be found who command respect, who will be neutral enough and firm enough to find a solution that works for every person. And we should find it. The situation in the Rivers State is not making Nigeria as a nation look good. The whole world is watching, and our ability to manage our crisis and be able to live with our differences should be uppermost in our minds. People should disagree, but people can disagree without being disagreeable or without breaking down law and order and making the state move ahead. And like our people say, when two brothers fight, the enemies benefit. There are so many merchants of grief. There are so many people who are benefiting from this crisis and who may not want it to end. But the brothers who are fighting in Rivers State should be able to say to them, enough of this. Let me settle with my brother for the good of my family. That should be the attitude and the mindset.
Well, earlier when you were speaking, you picked holes in the voice vote that was adopted by, the National Assembly. If you recall, that session where they deliberated on the matter, especially the Senate, was held behind closed doors, after which they came out to adopt their resolution. Not one single dissenting voice was heard. They all admitted to that resolution. So what do you have to say about that?
So you think?
I was there, present.
No, in the behind the scene. In behind the scene.
Yes, there were arguments, but when they came out from that closed door, they all adopted that resolution.
You see, the eyes have it. We have seen situations in Nigeria where the eyes have it and the names are equally very loud. Whether they agreed or not, when the Constitution has said to third, you must vote. Each individual person's vote must be tallied.
But at least we could have had one dissenting voice.
That is not
there was no single dissenting voice.
Please. The fact that you have, if I in plenary session, in executive session, I insist that you should take it one by one and you refuse. I say, look, when we're coming down, say the eyes have it. Of what use am I making noise? The fact that I kept silent does not mean that I have said yes. And my people say that when you're talking to a person who has impaired vision and having a light, adjusting his eyes to the light, he must be holding his head to know when he says yes or no. The Constitution says to third, and to third to ascertain it, there must be individual votes so that the record will show Senator A voted aye. Senator B voted yes. Senator C abstained. Abstention is also a mode of voting. Are you aware? Yeah. That's why you should take a vote, not a voice vote.
Well, tell us about Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution, upon which President Tinubu based his decision. I would like you to expatiate on that, because you said the president acted unconstitutionally. So
you say the time of war, there's some kind of illness, the nation is at war, or that part of the state is at war, or there's such a breakdown of law and order that can only be dealt with that. Then you need to take extraordinary measures. Within 24 hours, we were told there were 2 pipeline explosions. 2. Was not investigated. We do not know who was behind it or why they happened. Even before the end of the 24th hour, the proclamation was made.
But we had comments from the governor.
Bear that in mind.
Inciting some youths.
Citing some youths.
Inciting.
Inciting some.
So he made some inciting comments that if his impeachment goes through.
Well, I did not hear that. The impeachment did not go through. Notice had not been served on him, or if I had been, okay, was served on him. I said, sorry, read in the media. It does not justify that, my sister. I mentioned some other areas where there were actual breakdown of land in parts of the state, lives being lost, properties being burnt, without us resorting to this. So you ask yourself, why was Rivers different?
Okay.
Why was it different? Why did it have to take place within 24 hours that the violence started? If the governor incited people, according to you, is it enough? People have also said, if this happen, hell will be let loose.
That's not according to me. Just to
well, I don't know. I didn't read that.
There are videos to that effect.
Well, I've not seen it. I would like to watch. I will look at when I leave here. I'll go look for them.
All right.
But the point I'm making is that the circumstance, even the incitement, shouldn't be met with the action. But I think we've argued so much law. We should be thinking about finding solution to the problem. Okay. Should be finding lasting peace to Rivers.
Okay. Exactly. Just thinking about.
And all of them also have something to do with our electoral process, how people come to power. But that's not part of the conversation for today.
Okay. Just before this proclamation, there was the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission fixed August for the local government election, trying to comply with the Supreme Court judgment. In the light of what has happened, can that still hold?
Why shouldn't it? If the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission is independent, really, it shouldn't take directives from the administrator. It should be able to proceed with the election to ensure that the democratic system of local government guaranteed for local governments by the Constitution is put in place. I don't see why not, except somebody has an interest in seeing that there is no democratic system of government at the local government level. I don't see why it shouldn't. Or if somebody staffs it of funds for the conduct of the election. I think it's in everybody's best interest that that election proceeds.
But the governor of Fubara is not in charge. There's an administrator in charge. So you say you shouldn't take a directive from the administrator.
Who said so? Did I say so?
Okay.
De facto, leader of Rivers State today is administrator.
Yeah.
Even though we say his appointment is an aberration, is unconstitutional. And in constitutional law, you look at whether something is constitutional and then what is the actual reality. Just like in a military rule is an aberration. But if by their effectiveness soldiers overthrow democratically elected government and assert their control and take over the reins of power, some writers have suggested that by the success of their coup, they have overthrown the lawful order and enthroned a new legal order, whose legitimacy will be justified by their success. So, in that sense, the appointment of the administrator is like a coup on the Constitution, because it's an appointment not known to the Constitution.
Well, in this Rivers State political crisis, everyone keeps talking about Governor Fubara and Minister Wike ignoring the state legislators who have been at the receiving end of this fight. Do you think that much has not been done to placate this critical group?
Well, it is obvious that His Excellency Governor Nyesom Wike has some influence on the 27 legislators. Maybe that's why people call him.
Why do you say so?
There's also publicly available evidence where he said that he supported all the persons who emerged winners in Rivers State. I don't want us to be dragged into that. How do we solve the problem in Rivers? Wike is a major party in it. Fubara is a major party in it. Legislators are.
But they seem to be ignored.
Nobody is ignoring any person, I believe. If they're being ignored, then it should stop. People should be brought to a table to find a solution. Nobody should be slighted. Nobody should be treated with contempt as if they didn't matter. In this peace process, every single person is important because a chain is as strong as its weakest link. So that person you think may be insignificant may create a problem down the road. So, and I think in identifying parties that need to be spoken with to achieve peace, all the people we have referred to should be on the table.
Okay, 2027 election is just around the corner. What kind of electoral reforms will you advocate before we get into that election so that we don't keep doing the same thing the same way and want a different result?
I think we need to look at our laws and look at some of the court judgments that have also created some uncertainty as to how best to approach the law or how best to prove irregularities and whatever in our law. And the legislature should look at the court judgments and if there are areas that need to be strengthened so that our electoral process can work better, so the process of challenging or proving victory will be properly established, also allowing for electronic voting and allowing for instant electronic tabulation of results. I was in Ghana for the election and I saw how transparent that process largely was, how votes were transmitted electronically and how people had confidence in the process. The IRF, which has been downgraded by a court judgments, should be accorded statutory recognition as a mode of collecting data from the polling unit and a mode of proving things in an electoral contest should be clearer. The mindset behind Section 137 of the Electoral Act should be properly recognized. If there's a poor drafting in it, as have been alleged by some judgments, it should be properly drafted, so that when you produce documents from INEC, nobody will discount them because, oh, you were not there, you are not the maker, you did not call the maker, you have to go and call, and you call the maker and say, oh, that person is not the electoral. You need to go and bring the beaver. We need to bring in things that make some of these things very easy to resolve. We need to make the process transparent, and we must be seen to embrace technology so that this incident or allegation that when people vote, by the time they get to the collation center, results change between the hours of darkness and daybreak will no longer be there. So that from the polling units, people will be able to properly say, this is how the voting went.
No. You said the way forward is for peace, and we have seen also, as part of the National Assembly's resolution, is the constitution of a committee of eminent Nigerians. Which kind of formation do you expect to see this committee constitute?
It is not for me to say, but whoever has to make that decision should make it as quickly as possible. We should put it in place to start work. In your intro, you noted that tension is rising, and I think to de-escalate the tension, you need to put in place a mechanism that is seen to be addressing the concerns, the issues, the identified issues, with a view to find a solution.
Okay, so which means as it is now, we've accepted what has happened, the proclamation we've accepted, the National Assembly's role we've accepted. And
I am not sure we have accepted. We haven't accepted that it's right. And there could be a reversal of the same. We have not accepted. It is wrong. We have not accepted it.
Set us back.
I don't want to, there's no setback. I don't know what you mean setting us back. We must find a solution, but we have not accepted the wrongdoing. Okay. And I shouldn't be left here, I shouldn't live here and it is said that, oh, we have accepted. We haven't. It is wrong, it is wrong. If it is wrong, it can't be right.
A little deviation from our topic. Would you like to say something about the controversy generated by the suspension of a lawmaker for gross misconduct and the emergence of fresh allegations of sexual harassment? What is your personal view about this matter?
These matters, to my knowledge, are in court, and it will not be nice for me to speak about matters that people have submitted to court for adjudication. That would not be proper.
So you admit that this matter is in court?
This very matter is in court, and going by its very sensitive nature, it will not be right for us to comment on them. Should allow, since the parties have taken their dispute to court, let the court make a pronouncement, then the judgments of the court may be discussed, but not the processes pending before the court.
Just before we go, I think the National Assembly just made an attempt to try to amend some portions of the constitution. And what is your take on this latest move by the National Assembly?
The constitution we have now is not perfect, but if we operate it fairly and justly, it will work for us. The operators of the constitution are the problem. We'll keep amending our constitution. And I hope that in this process of amendment, we should de-emphasize giving priority to political cases to have a fast track through our courts, while de-emphasizing cases that border on commercial disputes, issues of human rights, criminal adjudication, and internal justice sector reform. We should make such amendments that make Nigeria an attractive destination for investment, tourism, and businesses. We should place so much premium on politics and the ability of politicians to have a quick pass through our courts, while emphasizing the things that will make us stick as a nation, that will make us build solid foundation for the future. And I think we spend so much time on the things that don't count. This amendment process should intone a mindset of nation building, not allowing politicians to quickly resolve their dispute, which is what seems to be what we do all the time. All the time. There are many justice sector reforms that will make for a more functional and effective judiciary, that will make for a more functional NJC. Relationship between different bodies and the judges and judging process. We should focus on that. On the kind of time it will take for the adjudication of matters, I think I would rather suggest that we pay more attention to them. Not whether cases should be determined within 180 days. You must do this for politicians. All right. It all seems to be all about grabbing power, but not about delivering the dividends of the democracy to the people.
Thank you very much.
Well, we must thank you so much for your time with us on the program. President of the Nigerian Bar Association, Afam, Osigwe, it was a delight speaking with you this morning.
Thank you so very much for having me. Thank you.
Well, that's our robust package from here.